Hello again, I'm back. I have had my lunch. They actually had hot dogs there. I had a soda with it. Continuing my journey on Avenue of the Giants in California through the redwoods. And what I was going to talk about today is this channel is primarily about climate. My thoughts on climate. We have had virtually no tropical activity globally. There's been practically no typhoons in the Pacific. No activity in the Atlantic. Yeah, they named a few systems, but they weren't really... Like, if this was the 70s, none of them would have gotten a name. We would have been still at zero if this was the 70s. We would have not had any systems yet. They're already up to letter E because they name every little wisp of cloud anymore that forms. So we have a system that came off Africa. I looked at it. Everybody's talking about becoming a major hurricane. Oh, it's going to threaten the U.S. Next week or something, because this is August 11th. We're getting into the middle of August. There is no activity currently in the Atlantic basin. The entire Atlantic basin is free of activity right now, has been for weeks. And they're talking all of a sudden this one system, one little cluster of thunderstorms is going to become a major hurricane. For one, the system is way north. It's right over the Cape Verde Islands. To get a system to threaten the U.S., it has to form several hundred miles south of there and go west. This system's already going to the northwest. Meaning it's a fish storm. 99.9% probability. Even if it does develop into anything, it's a fish storm. It's going to hit the colder waters in off northwestern Africa, and it's not going to amount to anything. In the Pacific, yeah, we've had a few tropical storms. Most of them, technology has, I've talked about this in the past, technology is being used to enhance convection to get tropical systems going where maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. They're also manipulating the MJO to try to stay in favorable phases for hurricanes in general for the eastern U.S. I definitely noticed that when I looked at the satellite imagery this morning. Finally had decent internet that I could do all that. As you can see, this is Avenue of the Giants. That's the sign right there. There's still talk that this is going to be an active season. I have talked about numerous times that we're going to reach a threshold point where the tropical systems are going to become obsolete as we've known them. Reason being, they've used technology in the last 10 years to force systems to develop where they wouldn't have, taking excess heat out of the oceans and upsetting the balance of nature in that regard to the point where there's going to be no excess heat left to form these storms because they form from excess heat energy in the oceans. If they have unnaturally taken that all out to force storms to develop, we're going to reach a threshold where we're not going to get any more tropical systems. They're going to become obsolete for many years, perhaps. It's already starting to happen globally. We're in the middle of August, and the reason why I say it's starting to happen, I went to Okinawa in 1983. Early August, we flew in, and I was in the military, and there was a typhoon lurking off Okinawa in early August. I remember seeing the clouds from it off in the distance, and Okinawa was hit by, or threatened by, several different typhoons in the several months that followed that, in September and October. One was equivalent of a Cat 5 hurricane that just missed Okinawa. This year, early August, the Pacific is quiet. There are no typhoons anywhere. We are approaching a threshold where there's no longer going to be any tropical systems, and people are going to be scratching their head wondering what happened to them. They're going to try to blame it on global warming. Oh well, I guess global warming causes these storms to no longer develop anymore. No, that wouldn't be the answer. They're not developing anymore because the heat energy isn't there anymore. The heat energy is gone. These systems cannot naturally form anymore. They have to force them through technology. But eventually, even that's not going to work anymore. By then, we're going to be way over the threshold, and it could be years, decades before we see these storms again. The reason why I say that is because the sun, I've talked a lot about the sun and solar activity and how solar maximum heat gets put back in the ocean, and these storms form off the excess heat. They form so that the nature remains balanced. They transport heat, excess heat, carry it up to the poles, and it gets released. You don't have the excess heat anymore, you're not going to get the storms anymore. No matter how much you try through technology, it's eventually going to hit a threshold where the storms are going to disappear for a time. And we're past the solar max now. And the only reason we got storms last year, I feel, is because the sun in May of last year, 2024, got very active for 1 month and put some heat back in the oceans. Replenished at least some of the heat. Of course, most of that was used up last year with the storm that hit North Carolina, a bunch of other tropical systems, mostly formed, I feel, by technology. They took out all that heat in just one season, used it up. So now this year, we're going into the middle of August. We have not had as much solar activity this year. Therefore, there's not been as much heat put into the oceans as much as last year. It's going to be harder to get a storm to form this year. The heat isn't there. All these people saying it's going to be an active season. are not factoring in the sun and how it influences this sort of stuff. The sun rules as king. So, I feel this could potentially, I'm not saying definitely, be a no-show season. We may not even see any hurricanes this year. We may not even see a single hurricane. I would not be surprised. Because globally, there's no typhoons in the Pacific. The Eastern Pacific has not seen any real storms either. The signs point toward it being a no-show season. I could be wrong, but we're almost in the middle of August, and there is pretty much no tropical activity going on. Very minor, if anything. I know people say, well, you know, the peak doesn't come until September. Yeah, that's true. It is true. However, things by now usually start to pick up. They're not. Every little cloud mass that comes off Africa is going to be a major hurricane. The models jump on it. And 99 times out of 100, the models lately have been wrong. Because they're not taking into account what I've been talking about here. Well, I've been reading posts saying we are going to get the first major hurricane of the season. It's a little system that just came off Africa. The models are all saying it's going to turn into a hurricane, a huge system. We'll see. I don't agree with it. I have talked about the sun shutting down in recent videos. Rolf Wetzel, I think his name is. I don't know if we're going to see a total shutdown this cycle or not. He did admit that he may be off on the timing. If there's any chance he's right, we are standing on the precipice of a new ice age. On my bike tour, what I found remarkable about the weather was the lack of sustained hot weather. Toured across the country all summer, across the whole U.S. And what I noticed was the lack of sustained hot weather anywhere. We did get 3 hot days in Kansas. It got up to 104 degrees the end of June with a 40-mile-an-hour wind all 3 days. And I almost sat out the 3 days. I didn't, but I should have. But it did not last all summer like that. It only lasted 3 days and things returned to normal temperature-wise. And once I got into Colorado and went through the Rockies, through Wyoming, Montana, the amount of hot days through there I could count on one hand. I think I had one really hot day in Montana, but it was only one day. And I had one uncharacteristically chilly, rainy day in Idaho at the end of July 20th. I still remember that. We had a temperature struggled to break 60 degrees all day, and it rained most of the day. I know, I rode through it. We actually got snow up in Alberta out of that system. I could not believe I was encountering that kind of weather at all in late July in Idaho, where it's normally in the 90s. And pretty much just about every single night it's down in the 40s. I know it's a high elevation and it's normally cool, but it was consistently chilly down in the 40s every night, pretty much through the Rockies. The effects of the Tonga eruption are wearing off. And here is, I'll try to turn the camera over, Allen F. Butler Family Grove, Redwoods. I'm climbing up a huge hill at the moment. So yeah, I am leaning toward this is going to be a no-show season for tropical systems, and people are going to be scratching their heads wondering what the hell is going on. We almost had it last year. We were into the middle of September before they finally were able to get systems going through technology. Without technology, last year would have been a no-show, I feel. Last year would have been a total no-show without technology. There were no satellites. We would not have had any storms last year. The big question is, will technology be able to... Have we passed the threshold where technology will not even be able to create or trigger a storm to develop anymore? Because I feel we've already crossed the threshold. Like, if there were no satellites, we wouldn't get any more storms forming naturally. I think we have already crossed that threshold, perhaps. I know it sounds crazy. We've had hurricanes through history. Even in colonial times, we don't know the Maunder minimum if there were hurricanes. Columbus didn't encounter any on his voyages to the New World. He came during peak of hurricane season across the Atlantic and didn't have any problems. Apparently, back in the 1500s, hurricanes were a lot less frequent, maybe even non-existent. Otherwise, he would have encountered at least some rough weather. So I am climbing a huge incline here. I don't know when it's going to end, so I'm going to end this video. I will be back soon.